Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about something slightly different than the usual, which I have been thinking about for some time. Something that so many of us face but maybe feel like we can't talk about, not even with our church communities. I'm talking about addiction. It's this shadow that keeps following you, making you feel isolated, ashamed, and just completely stuck. And let me just say right now, if that's you, you are not alone. This struggle is real, it's raw, and it can feel like a battle you're losing every single day. But I want you to hear me on this. There is hope, and there is a way through it. The thing about addiction is that it doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care if you grew up in church, if you lead a small group, or if you've had a relationship with Jesus your whole life. It can creep into anyone's story. We sometimes have this idea that Christians are supposed to have it all together, but that's just not reality. We're all human, and we all have our battles. The Bible is so clear about this in Romans chapter 3, verse 23, where it says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." That verse isn't meant to shame us, it's meant to unite us. It puts us all on level ground at the foot of the cross. So let us confront our shame right now. Let's decide that this is a place to be honest about our struggle. There is absolutely zero shame in admitting you need help. In fact, it's one of the bravest, most courageous things you can ever do. It's the first step toward the freedom that God has waiting for you. Today, we're going to walk through what it looks like to find that freedom, not through our own strength, but through the incredible, life-changing power of Christ. The very first step, and honestly, sometimes the hardest one, is just being real with yourself and with God. Now, many of you might say that you already did that, but no matter how much you are struggling to change, nothing happens. If that is you, please keep watching for a few more minutes. We will talk about this exact problem later in the video. However, I would advise you to not skip this part of the video, but rather watch and reflect on yourself and what is being presented here. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I am struggling, I am not okay, and I cannot do this on my own. For so long, we can try to hide it, manage it, or pretend it's not as bad as it is. We build these walls around our hearts because we're afraid of what people will think, or maybe we're even afraid of what God thinks. We convince ourselves that if we just try a little harder, we can fix it. But that's a lie the enemy loves for us to believe because it keeps us isolated and in the dark. Light can't get in until we're willing to open the door, even just a crack. Being honest about your addiction isn't a sign of weakness. It's a profound act of faith. It's you saying, God, I'm at the end of my rope and I'm finally ready to grab onto yours. Remember, Romans chapter 3, verse 23 tells us we all fall short. This isn't a you problem, it's a human problem. Your struggle with addiction doesn't define you or disqualify you from God's love. It actually positions you perfectly to experience His grace in a way you never have before. Your honesty becomes the fertile ground where God can begin His work of healing and restoration. So, what does this look like practically? It might mean finally saying the words out loud to someone you trust. It could be writing it down in a journal just between you and God. It's dropping the act and getting brutally honest in your prayers. No more polished, churchy prayers. I'm talking about the messy, tear-filled, God, I'm a wreck, please help me kind of prayers. That authenticity is what God is waiting for. He's not scared of your mess. He's not surprised by your struggle. He's a loving Father who sees you, who loves you, and who is ready to meet you right where you are in the middle of it all. Okay, so once we've been honest, what's next? So often our next move is to try and fix the problem ourselves. We think, okay, I've admitted it. Now I just need to have more willpower. I need to stop the behavior. We create new rules, new systems, and we try with all our might to just change our actions. And while that might work for a little while, it's usually not a lasting solution. Why? Because addiction isn't just a behavior problem, it's a heart problem. It's a worship problem. We're looking for comfort, peace, or escape in something other than God. And just changing our behavior doesn't change what our heart is chasing after. This is where the gospel changes everything. True, lasting freedom doesn't come from our willpower. Now here is something that I learned from someone's experience regarding addiction that most people on the internet don't really talk about. That person struggled with their addiction for years, and yet, no matter for how many years he prayed to God hoping for an escape, he was never successful until he reached a certain breaking point. He says the following: "When you are tormented with addictions, struggling for years, praying day and night with no success, but you still keep going not only because you believe that God loves you, but also because He is the last thing in your life that seems to have a chance to free you and help you, you will almost certainly reach a point where you will think and tell God this." The following is a quote from this person from when he was struggling in his darkest moments of his life. "Lord, I don't see any reason to continue fighting. It's clear that I can't get over this addiction, and that struggling against it does nothing to it. On one hand, I don't believe that I can win in any shape or form against this addiction, which now feels more like a sickness that keeps beating me down, leaving no pleasure or purpose in my life. On the other hand, I believe that you exist and that you want me to somehow beat it. So here is what I will do. I give up on doing and trusting anything that I have been using to try and keep myself in control. No more exercises, cold showers, or anything else that people keep promoting for those who struggle. I will continue to keep away from the things or situations that makes it harder for me to resist against it, even if it will make my life harder or make me weird from the perspective of others. But I do not believe that keeping away from those things will help me. The only reason I will keep myself away from them is because you commended us to keep away from the things that makes us sin. I do not know how you will make me stop, but I know you want to do it. I don't really see any method you could use to stop me, but I will trust you with it." This person said that he made this prayer whenever he felt tempted to fall back into his addiction, as well as whenever he was alone or when he fell back into sin. One of the weirdest things happened after that, something you don't really hear when talking about this type of topic. Here's what he said. For a few days, it seemed that it was becoming a little easier to resist his temptations. At first, he was full of hope and started to actively resist his addiction just like before, taking walks, working out, and so on. But as soon as he started to fight against it, it became harder to fight it, and in the end, he failed. Losing all hope, he went back to that prayer from the beginning, and again, it started to become easier to resist. Again, full of hope, he tried to take advantage of this, created a plan on how to fight his addiction, and again, he started struggling and then failed. After that, he was filled with despair, barely having any hope left inside him. He again went back to the beginning, having no trust that he can defeat his addiction, while also believing that God could somehow help him escape, even though he could not understand how. He later joked, not in ridicule, but with genuine appreciation, about this contradictory thinking. On one hand, he believed with all his heart that there was no way to defeat what he has struggled against for years. On the other hand, he believed with all his heart that God could somehow solve it all. Even weirder, he believed both of these statements at the same time as being absolutely true. In his words, he said, "It was impossible to defeat my problem, but God often worked by doing and beating the impossible." It was a contradictory method of thinking and yet still believed it to be the absolute truth. He said that after falling again, he started praying just like in the beginning, and again he had the impression that it became slightly easier to defeat his addiction. But this time, he no longer trusted that he could just start fighting and actually win, like the other times. He continued just praying, having no hope in his own ability, and weirdly enough, he started resisting for longer than usual. He went from resisting a day or two to resisting an entire week. Still, he didn't trust himself that he could fight, and just continued praying just as in the beginning. And yet instead of falling down again, it continued to become easier to resist. Soon enough, he started being weirded out by this. He successfully resisted for 3 whole weeks after not being able to stop himself for just a few days. But then, something tragic happened. After 3 whole weeks, he started becoming hopeful again that he could resist his addiction, tried his best to fight it, and ended up giving in, failing yet again. However, he started to understand what was happening, why he could suddenly resist his temptations, and why he kept failing. He says that he believes the following. He presumes that perhaps the reason why he kept failing whenever he started to become hopeful and tried to fight against his sin was because God wanted him to place his entire hope on the Lord and only on the Lord, and whenever he tried to make even the slightest attempt to put his trust in any other method that he learned to stop his addiction, whether it would be exercising, taking walks, or any other thing, God would end up leaving him to his own abilities, which is why he failed. After that, this person again started praying just as at the beginning, but whenever he started to feel hope that he might succeed, he says that he also prayed to God to take away his trust into himself and stop him from fighting on his own abilities, and thus he slowly escaped his addiction. He still had times he felt overconfident in his ability to resist sin and fell. But with the grace of God, he managed to escape again. However, he also mentioned another important lesson, that this prayer did not work if he didn't actively fight from putting himself in situations where giving in was easy. He explained that our freedom from addictions will never arrive from God if we are not willing to do what he commended us to do, because usually God doesn't want to work with someone who is not willing to work for himself. Instead, he says the following. We should trust God because nothing else will ever work. But we should also work to defeat our addictions just like those who try to escape addiction without God. We must fight against it as if we will die if we won't, purely because God commended us to do so. But we should trust none of our attempts to escape, but rather trust God. When he struggled, he gave up hope that workouts, walks, or any other activity could help him. But he still avoided situations when he was alone, or activities that tempted him, even when he believed that he was going to fail no matter what, and that it no longer mattered if he tried to defeat his sin. This is because God ordered us to try and fight it. This person wants to leave us with a few lessons that he learned from his experience, as well as a few verses from the Bible which strongly touched his heart. One of these verses is John chapter 8, verse 36 says, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Before we start with his lessons in the second part, we must point out that the first lesson that we have to learn is that we should not act as if this is something that will offer some partial freedom or a temporary fix. This is a deep, soul-level, chain-breaking freedom that only he can offer. We must act and believe as if God is the only solution to our problem in the entire universe. This is all about surrendering our fight and letting him fight for us. It's about letting his grace transform us from the inside out. This is a daily, sometimes moment-by-moment choice to say, Jesus, I can't, but you can. I give this struggle to you. I trust your power more than my own weakness. This isn't a one-time prayer, but a continual posture of the heart. When the temptation comes, instead of gritting your teeth and trying to fight it alone, you run to him. You declare his truth over your situation. You remind yourself that you are no longer a slave to sin, but a child of God. This is the shift that changes everything. It's not about you becoming stronger. It's about you relying on the one who is infinitely strong. We will continue in the next video with some lessons extracted from this testimony. Stay tuned.